I have been playing a concerning amount of Mortal Kombat over the past few weeks. This had led me to messing around with some old mods in Skyrim that turned me into Scorpion, along with all the inevitable bells and whistles. Thing is, it's overpowered as all hell, and I'm not long after doing a Skyrim character based run, so I've decided to shelve the idea for the time. No doubt I will come back to it at some point. That did, however, give me the idea for this week's video, in an odd way, so now we're switching games and asking the question, can you beat Fallout 4 as a Radscorpion? I have already attempted 2 creature-based runs of Fallout 4 in the past, once as a Deathclaw and another time as a gorilla. Quick side note, the gorilla video got hit with an age restriction almost immediately back when it was released, so many people were not aware of it, so we can take this time as a little reminder that it does in fact exist, and I was able to get the age restriction removed. Anyway, as I have done something similar before, the rules are the same as those 2 runs. Once I leave the vault and can turn into a scorpion, I must stay as one for the rest of the run. If I need to change back into a human for any other reason to progress, then the run is failed. Also, keeping with the tradition of these runs, I will also be going with a different faction this time. That being either the Real Road or the Brotherhood of Steel. Knowing me, you can probably make a pretty safe bet as to where my loyalties lie. Like the other playable creatures mods, this was once again created by DummyBot. A link to the mod should be in the description down below. Now, with all that out of the way, let's begin. Starting at the vault exit, it's right into my special stats, and first things first, I call him Hanzo, and make sure to have an agility of 8, so that when I read the I'm Special book back in Sanctuary, I can bump it to 9 and get the Blitz perk. I am attempting to get ahead of the creature's jank today by getting this right away, so that I hopefully will not get stuck behind the turnstile again in Park Street Station. The rest of my points just go into strength, endurance and luck. It's a melee build after all, and those are the best specials to, well, specialise in. As soon as we're free, we make our way to the chemistry station and, like a mad scientist, turn ourselves into an absolutely horrendous creature. Unlike the Deathclaw, you don't need a mod to adjust the camera, as the Radscorpion is small enough to fit into view just fine. Initially, I was concerned that I was going to be painfully slow, but thankfully that's just when you have your pincers, and I quote, sheathed. Holding in the ready weapon button, or just attacking, puts you into attack mode, where your speed is increased dramatically. Nothing happens when I try to sprint, so I can always travel at max speed without having to worry about draining my action points. According to the mod author, he believes the Radscorpion is the most fun to use due to how many attacks it has, and honestly, I would probably agree. Just about every combination of the attack, bash and block buttons seems to do something different. It also depends if you press them together, how long you hold them down for, or even which direction you're moving when pressing said buttons. It gives you quite a lot to work with, and it's wonderful. Considering I am a creature you normally wouldn't encounter until a decent way through the game, I am more than able to pinch and stab the Raiders in Concord to a much deserved afterlife. Preston isn't very picky with who he calls on for aid. Remember, in another life, he voted that a gorilla be put in charge of the Minutemen. Helping the Minutemen is all well and good, but my scorpion senses tell me that there are other people in need of assistance, so I scurry off to lend a helping claw. Wolfgang gets hit with the signature, that being poison from the stinger being injected directly into the hole where his eye used to be, whereas Simone gets hit with the multiple fake-out mix-up and simply gets clumped. I get my reward, bottle caps that will never be used, and then return to Preston to show the Raiders that nobody messes on Hanzo's home turf. Unfortunately for them, fighting indoors works out pretty well as a Radscorpion, as I don't get stuck on most of the geometry, yet, and can easily slip by and murderize anyone who even so much as thinks about pulling out the bug repellent. The only major drawback so far is other melee opponents. If you have ever used a melee weapon in Fallout 4, then you are probably aware that the Radscorpion can be very easily stun locked if you have a fast weapon. This is because each hit causes it to recoil in fear, and as a result cancels any attack that it may have been about to use. I can usually get by one melee enemy with no issues, but if they start to gang up on me, it's going to cause problems. Also, sometimes getting interrupted causes the Radscorpion's run animation to glitch out, and I will kind of just glide across the ground. It eventually fixed itself every time it happened, but still, I think it's important to bring this up now, so you can all understand why sometimes it looks like I'm just drifting around corners. Anyway, it's time for the fight with the Deathclaw, and it's incredibly simple. I mean, I got stuck in the hole in the ground almost right away, but we'll be choosing to ignore that for the most part. Whenever I managed to find my way back out, it was very clear that the Deathclaw really didn't have anywhere near as much health as I initially thought, as I very quickly proceeded to pinch and poison him to death. The tail attack does actually poison, by the way. You don't see the effect very often as it one-shots most enemies in the beginning, but still it's a nice touch. A few more pinches after he is finished abusing his longer arms, he goes down, and I can easily mop up the final handful of degenerates. Considering how easily I dealt with the Deathclaw, I decided to up the difficulty to very hard. Hopefully, it should make things a little more difficult. Spoiler warning, for the most part, at least right now anyway, it didn't seem to change a whole lot. I started to adventure around for a bit, simply because I was having a lot of fun with the Scorpion. During this, I fought many ghouls, gunners, and raiders, and not one of them could inflict a sizable amount of damage on me. Like usual, I specifically went and paid Red's gang a visit at the Federal Ration stockpile, as it's a good supply of early game XP, and plus I thought they may prove a challenge. Well, the raiders themselves were child's play. I had to leave some of the turrets though, as I couldn't reach them. The Radscorpion can jump, by the way. At a standstill, it does a backwards jump that I can use to position myself on things if need be. If I hold back and then press jump, however, it turns into a lunge where I snip-snap with my pincers for massive damage. Not to worry, it cannot be spammed as it is technically classified as a heavy attack, and as a result, it needs action points. Also, unlike the gorilla, the Radscorpion just has a normal supply of action points. He doesn't get like thousands of them like the gorillas seem to do. Back to the task at hand, Red's dead without any redemption in sight, and I can continue heading south as I may as well mark some areas on the map for later, seeing how I'm already here. I'm about level 5 at this stage, and there's not a lot to say about perks. I literally only took Iron Fist, Blitz, and Idiot Savant. For the most part, everything else just went into increasing my special stats. The road to Fort Hagen is always empty, excluding this one Yalguai that you can easily avoid. Today, I of course do not do that, and prove why the Scorpion is apparently the top of the food chain around here. After reaching Fort Hagen, I could have just began heading into Boston, but instead, I decided to take the scenic route to the Glowing Sea. I mean, why not? Given it's the first part of my species name, I am in fact immune to all forms of radiation, meaning I could just stroll through the sea without a care in the world. Or at least you would think so, but then again, everything here still wants my head, including my own family. Now, there was an option to have myself marked as a friendly in the Radscorpion faction, but I never did that with the Deathclaw or Gorilla, so I wasn't about to start doing it here. This meant I was fighting for my life the entire time, regardless of being able to breathe the air. In case you're wondering, the reason why I keep randomly jumping to attack things behind me while I fight this Deathclaw, well, whenever you hold back an attack, the Radscorpion does a quick 180. It's pretty good for dealing with enemies who have maneuvered behind you for what it's worth. However, whenever you get smacked with a melee attack, as I said earlier, you get knocked back a bit. This classifies as moving backwards, so more often than not, after I've been hit, I try to fight back right away, and end up doing so too fast, resulting in the game believing I'm holding back on the stick, and causing me to keep striking at nothing. Eventually, I was able to get used to it, but this happened a lot throughout the entire run. After getting past the in-laws, I went to fight Mercy, simply because grabbing the BFG from his dead hands completes the From Hell quest, and will award me a good little bit of extra experience. He manages to get a single blast off, which very nearly kills me, but it does cripple him, allowing for me to easily win the fight. This being the Glowing Sea, it's not long before more creatures try to rip me to shreds, and of course the next thing to grace my body with the intent to kill was another Deathclaw. I attempted to fight back, but it was very clear I was not going to last more than a few seconds before becoming dinner. With a literal sliver of health to my name, I retreated further into the Great Green Glow. In an embarrassing turn of events, while making my way for Virgil's cave, I was jumped and killed by a mole rat of all things, due to me being careless. I'm not allowing stim packs today. The only way I could heal myself right now was either a well-timed level up or a bed. History then repeats itself almost immediately as I get killed over and over by a blood bug due to a bad spawn and Fallout 4's weird loading that means your character is loaded in a few seconds before you can move, leading to a constant cycle of death. Thankfully, you can avoid this by quickly opening the Pip-Boy as soon as the loading screen ends, and then you can close it and move before the blood bug takes your life for its gods. I just take a safer route this time and avoid everything, and finally manage to mark Virgil's cave. Once I do so, I then immediately left, because I prefer to live, thank you very much. Alright, so my options are find Nick, or start siding with my faction of choice. I choose faction, and as such, my options are the Brotherhood of Steel, or the Railroad. So I help Paladin Dance re-deathify the unliving, before agreeing to help him murder his unknowing brothers and sisters at Arcjet. I will say it's kinda cool to be able to reach the turrets on the ceiling with the stinger. Makes it feel like a useful range tool. Ignore the fact that I have the Blitz perk and just keep forgetting about its existence. If we are talking about interesting uses of the Radscorpion, I should mention its ability to transcend space and time, and thus phase itself right through solid geometry at a moment's notice. From this point on, this seemed to happen almost at random in certain interior sections. After reviewing all of my footage, I think it was most likely to occur when I exited from a loading zone into a narrow corridor. After laying eyes on God's true form, which turned out to be a Pip-Boy of all things, I was able to clip into the bottom area where me and Dance were heading to power up the elevator. Rather than fry his circuits, I actually opted to go out and help Dance for a change. There isn't that many of them, and this way I actually get the experience for the kills. Before long, we have the transmitter, and Dance figures the Brotherhood could use a bit more diversity in its 99% human ranks, and welcomes me to the team. There's nothing more to do for him now, so it's off to Park Street Station to find Nick, and finally figure out if I can make it past that run-ending turnstile. But first, as I am the king of getting distracted, this was where I got up to some ruckus. Mainly, it's where the railroad footage from before actually comes from, and then I went and showed Swan who's boss. I planned for this to be a bit of practice, that way I could see if I was ready for the behemoth and mutants at Fort Strong in a bit. However, Swan was in pacifist mode today, I guess, as he didn't even try to fight back until he was basically already on death's door. It's kinda like if you decide to fight Parthenax in Skyrim. And just like that battle, I don't feel very good about myself after the fact. To cheer myself up, I head on over to Good Neighbor, and after I brutally decapitate Finn, I proceed to tear off his foot and then leave town with my new snack. Enough messing around, it was into the station, and now for the moment of truth. Thank God. I am so elated by being able to slip by with no issues that I just effortlessly slaughtered the Triggermen, all the while smiling at not feeling the run. They are slightly more defensive to give credit where it's due. They take 2 pinches to meet their doom as opposed to the normal 1. Side note, the first person Radscorpion freaks me out, mainly because its pincers actually look like they're interacting with the items. There's not much to cover in the vault, so let's fast forward to the fight with Skinny Malone. Per usual, I was expecting Darla and her bat to be a bit of a problem, especially with the stunlock issue that I've mentioned before. While she can be a pain, it's really no more than a minor annoyance, as I just focus down Skinny and his men and tear them to shreds. Me and Nick are now home free, and as such, it's off to Diamond City. I don't feel like running back and forth, something you should all probably have picked up by now, so to save some time I pinched Kellogg's keys from the mayor as soon as I entered the town. Now it was just time for the questions with Nick. Oh my. Fortunately, my flesh and bones all realign themselves perfectly the instant I stand up, so we can carry on like nothing has happened. Off to Kellogg's house, and there was a bit of trouble trying to position myself to open the hidden wall, but eventually I found the magic pixel, and we could get to stealing Kellogg's cigars and beers. Nick of course suggests letting Dogmeat have a puff, to which I wholeheartedly agree, and it was at this exact moment that my heart broke. For whatever reason, I cannot present the cigar to Dogmeat for him to track Kellogg. This is a required part of the story. There is no way to skip this. I know some of you have said before that you can just head straight to Fort Hagen if you know where it is, but that is not true. Going over to Fort Hagen now, even at this stage where the only part of the quest structure that I'm missing is having the dog sniff a cigar for God's sake, you will see that while the synths are indeed present, the elevator is boarded up with planks and is completely inaccessible. Remembering the phasing I just did at ArcJet, I tried to force it this time around, not only by re-entering the building multiple times, but by purposely doing the back jump into corners and on top of tables in the hopes that I would find part of the wall that I could just slip through. Any other game and I would say I was just wasting time, but we all know how these games work. They just require a little extra push sometimes. Sadly, after close to an hour, the closest I ever got was being able to see through the walls, and maybe having my stinger clip through, but not fully going through myself. Chances are, if I'd actually managed to get to the other side and activate the elevator, it would have just said it was without power, or Kellogg would just not be there. It's also entirely possible that even if I did manage to kill Kellogg, that I would need to talk to Nick anyway for the next part of the story, and he would still be waiting by Dogmeat, and thus I would probably be soft-locked. So, unfortunately, I have to go back to Dogmeat, learn that I am in fact a Werescorpion as I transform back into a human, and feel the run. As always, I'll still see the whole thing through, so I have him sniff the cigar, and now it's off to Fort Hagen. The synth's silly little arm rotation move is now the bane of my existence, as due to how many of them there are in here, it can make it surprisingly difficult to push through. The jumping double pinch is actually my best friend here, as it's usually fast enough to go past whatever they can throw at me. At the very least, dismembering synths is always an option, and makes them easier to deal with. Alright, on to Kellogg. Who wins? The genetically altered cyborg mercenary with years of experience, or the random Radscorpion who's convinced that this man has kidnapped his baby? The answer will not surprise you. Swiping all of the giblets I need from his corpse, I make my way back to the surface, only to discover that my new home is making its way for the airport. Naturally, I go and meet up with Dance, and after once again becoming an even further disgrace to nature, can arrive at the Pridwin and stand in awe at Maxon and his surprisingly clean coat. Now there's a lot of talking involved before we can get to Fort Strong, so let's just skip all of that and head straight there. After my last Fallout 4 run where I had to fight all of these mutants, including the behemoth with nothing but a baton, this was a very cathartic experience. They can still mess me up very easily, I might add, especially the behemoth, but should/when that happens, I can just retreat across the bridge and murder the two settlers of Nordhagen Beach. Doing so then gives me the settlement and allows me access to sleep in the bed. You may think that that is incredibly cruel, but I would like to remind you that I am playing as a Scorpion. I do not understand right and wrong, only what can and cannot be pinched. It's around here where I began to make use of the Blitz perk. I know, better late than never I suppose. I was able to deal with all of the normal mutants outside, but after damaging the behemoth a bit, it became clear I wasn't going to win the fight. So rather than running back to Nordhagen Beach again, I instead entered Fort Strong and got to work poisoning all of the mutants on the first floor. I cut it pretty close in the end as they nearly kill me, but I managed to come out on top, and thanks to some more backwards jumping, I can make it upstairs and sleep in one of the beds, heal up, and begin round 2 with the behemoth. As he never heals no matter how long you take, I now have a sizable health advantage which naturally wins me the fight. He may be able to stun me, but he cannot output enough damage by himself at this stage to squash me before I nip his toes to an unbearable degree. The final mutants hiding out in the basement aren't much better. I thought the missile trooper would give me trouble, but I think he ended up hurting himself and his friends more than me. Once again, Blitz saves the day, and I can be on my way. Rather than report back to Maxon now, I figured it made sense to catch up with the main quest. That means it's back to Diamond City to tell Nick I may or may not have eaten Kellogg off camera, and that it's time for the memory den. This, by the way, is the worst the den has ever been. Both times before when I entered Kellogg's memories with the creatures, I just run through as normal. The game is even still in third person, and you can just about see the outline of the creature as it has a stealth boy effect on it. Problem is, you can't attack while in the memories, meaning I am in the agonizingly slow walk speed that I showed for a grand total of 3 seconds at the beginning of the run. For context, in most videos I can just run through the den in about 2 to 3 minutes. This time around, at this pace, it took me close to 11 minutes. Keep in mind that is of course without stopping to listen to any of his memories, bar the final mandatory one. 11 minutes isn't a long time by any means, but when you're just walking in a void like this, it feels like an eternity. Once I am free from my imprisonment, I waste no time fast traveling back to Virgil's cave, as I can finally have a conversation with something that's as grotesque as me. The Radscorpion excels at murdering the gunners inside of Green Tech. I take up most of the space in the corridors, leaving the only place to run right into my claws for some easy pickings. Granted, this comes at the cost of most of my health. I wasn't going to be leveling up while I was here, and as far as I could remember, there were no beds in the immediate vicinity, so I would need to make do with what I had if I wanted to survive the courser. Sure, I could have left at any point to heal up elsewhere, but I did enough of that last time and was enjoying the pace of this run. In other words, I am choosing to be stubborn and not seek help. Not that I ended up needing it, as now I can finally be the one that stun locks as I face down the courser. He would definitely have won the encounter if he just backed up and used his laser pistol, but for some baffling reason, he figured pistol whipping was a better form of combat. Having beaten the story before doing only that, I can confirm that it isn't, and that his death was his own doing. As I am a wild animal, I make sure to relentlessly kill everyone in the vicinity before scuttling over the corpses of some nobodies to decode the chip so that I can construct the teleporter and make my way into the Institute to fail the run for a second time. Yes, so see this lift here? Whenever you activate it as a Radscorpion, you just phase right through it, leaving you at the bottom of the elevator shaft. Making matters worse is that the door cannot be opened from this side now, effectively soft-locking me unless I wish to load back. I tried it a few times, and each time the lift left me behind, so once again it was back to my human form to proceed, making me feel wrong. All of these frustrations reach the boiling point whenever Father enters the room. There's probably a joke here to be made about nature versus nurture, but unfortunately for Sean, in this current state I am much more familiar with the rules of nature. This promptly gets me kicked from the Institute, and as a result, Maxon isn't best pleased that I didn't manage to smuggle out Dr. Lee. It's not a huge setback, and if anything, this is way easier, as now I don't have to fend off the Assaultrons in Virgil's lab, but rather I just have to make my way to recruit Dr. Scar from the General Atomics Galleria, who is protected by a couple of Mr. Handies. They were understandably weak, the only one that put up any real fight was Strike, who was the only one who seemed to have access to a flamethrower for whatever reason. With the good doctor in our care, I am once more sent back home, only this time it's to find many big nukes and clear out a horde of feral ghouls and religious types. The ghouls, like any other day, run straight to their death, as I may as well have my pincer open the entire time, just so I can snip them all in one go. To my surprise, the Assaultron down near the nukes is not as much of a pain as I initially would have thought. Sure, stuns are ever present, but I can dismantle her before she has a chance to find out what the inside of a Scorpion looks like. I mark the bombs for pickup, and now Maxon yells at me, and I feel sad. It's time to find Paladin Dance and confront him for being a robot. No robots under the Brotherhood's command. Nope, not one. For what it's worth, I did attempt to convince him, but with a charisma of 1 and a face that resembles a burnt boot, that was never going to work. I allow him to get on his knees first so he can prepare himself, and then kill him in one of the most painful ways imaginable with a giant stinger to the skull. I am rewarded for my hitmanning ways, and now it's off to mass fusion. Approaching the building, and as I am still a Radscorpion, sort of, and my pincers are holding the minigun, there is nothing to say that this isn't something the Scorpion would do if it had the technical know-how. Raining hot lead down on the synths doesn't achieve a whole lot, after all it's still very hard, and I have 0 points into any weapon skills whatsoever. After the last synth is toast, I position myself just right and dive into Good Neighbor. Fortunately, you can move around in the air quite freely as a Radscorpion for whatever reason, so hitting the loading zone is easier than ever. This wasn't even just to save on time. Honestly, with the issues I've already had today with elevators, I wasn't taking my chances inside this single longest one in the entire story. On the bright side at least, I don't need to worry about getting the agitator and can instead take as long as feasibly possible should I want. The robotic reinforcements that show up afterwards were rather straightforward, honestly. Although, to be fair, I think my pincers, and especially my stinger, were going right through the sentry bot and damaging his cores in the back. This is because the damage I was inflicting seemed to fluctuate wildly during our short battle. All that leaves is the final assault on the Institute, and as usual, there's not a whole lot to talk about. Especially when siding with the Brotherhood, as all of their hardest challenges come leading up to the final attack. Once you're actually there at the end game, you're backed up by so many heavy-hitting soldiers and knights that it's near impossible to fail. That's not to say I still didn't help out, of course I did. The only real issue was that once more I was getting briefly stuck in floors and walls for one reason or another. After taking out a good chunk of the synths and non-combatants, I plant the pulse charge and get ready to leave. I decided to save RoboSean for a change, and then I pressed the button, blowing up the Institute, finishing the game, and proving no, you cannot beat Fallout New Vegas as a Radscorpion. I think with enough practice and understanding how to effectively glitch out of bounds, you may be able to do something about the Fort Hagen issue. But I honestly don't see a way I'd be able to get past a section in the Institute where the lift refused to do its one job. That's 3 out of 4 major factions down. That means next creature-based run has to join the railroad, and judging by some comments I've seen in the past, I will be doing so as a mole rat. Regardless, that's going to be in this challenge video. If you enjoyed what you saw, consider giving the video a like, and you're interested in more challenges in the future, feel free to subscribe. Try to have one of these videos every week. My name is Nerbit, stay safe everyone, I'll see y'all in the next video.